Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're all about the positivity here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He is perhaps one of the most controversial figures in professional wrestling, one of the most controversial characters. If you remember the Ruthless Aggression era, this man was one of the most despised heels of all time, but I'm pleased to welcome him now to the show. Mr. Marc Copani, a.k.a. Muhammad Hassan. Welcome, Marc, to Wrestling with Heart.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes, it's my pleasure. All right, so I had the pleasure of meeting you at WrestleCon earlier this year in Philadelphia. You grew up in Syracuse, New York. Tell me about your childhood and upbringing.
Well, I grew up in the city of Syracuse, and we moved out to the suburbs when I was around 9 years old. I have an older brother, younger sister. My parents are fantastic. I had a really blessed and fortunate upbringing. Very into sports, very into collecting baseball cards and comic books. I mainly played basketball. I went to a very big school. I went to Cicero North Syracuse High School. I think I graduated with like 800 people. The school is like over 2,000. So I never really played at the varsity level. It's a huge school. But I played baseball. I played basketball. I played football. Really, I got a job when I was 15 years old and wanted a car. And so most of my time was dedicated towards working and saving as much as I can. Um, Used to set up wrestling matches every Friday night. I had family friends that would come over, and we would set up wrestling matches in our basement, and then invite our parents come down and watch. So I was into wrestling since when I was a kid. I can still remember. I think I was 8. We still lived in the city, and I had walked down across the street and then the city, like kind of dangerous, all the way down to my buddy's house. My mom walked me to watch WrestleMania 3 at his house. And I still remember. I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood. I think most of them got punched out of me when I was in the ring. But I still remember watching WrestleMania 3, the build up, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant. And then I remember walking out and making a collect call on the payphone home, telling my mom to come get me. They weren't too happy with that. So, but I had a very fortunate upbringing. Like I said, my parents were great. I have a huge Italian family. We got together every single Sunday, pasta dinners at my grandmother's and grandfather's house. So pretty tight knit, large group of cousins, and we're still pretty close to this day.
And it's so cool you mentioned Hulk Hogan. You get to share the ring with him later on in your career. I mean, that's talk about a full circle moment right there. But you were a fan growing up of professional wrestling. What was it about professional wrestling that got you interested?
My father brought me to a show at the War Memorial right around that time, and I think that's kind of when I got hooked. And back then it was just a lot more it just seemed a lot more real when you were a kid, and everything was larger than life, and there wasn't the internet, and there wasn't any smart fans, and there wasn't any sort of rhetoric around what was happening in the match. You went there to be entertained. And so growing up and being into sports and also being into entertainment, I mean, I used to love watching the Olympics, like all of those big shows. Wrestling just kind of drew me in with those characters, and just that, like I said, that larger than life, like personas, and I just loved it. So it is something that my brother and I watched. And we used to have Royal Rumble parties with my family. During the Royal Rumble, we would all get together and order it on pay-per-view at the time, or if we got a scrambler, we could unscramble. I don't know. You look pretty young. You probably don't remember the scramblers. You
No.
have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?
No.
So way back then, you could order pay-per-view, or you could get a cheat box and you attach the cheat box to your cable, and it'll
Ah,
unscramble certain
interesting.
channels. And sometimes it was wrestling, and when you got a little bit older, it would unscramble some of the naughty channels that they had on
Yes.
TV at the time. So but we would have the Royal Rumble parties. I remember we would go to my aunt's house. This is when Survivor Series was on Thanksgiving. I don't think it is anymore, but we would go to my aunt and uncle's house every Thanksgiving and we'd watch Survivor Series. So my whole family was into wrestling, which was really cool when I became a wrestler. I remember we did a show in Binghamton, and pretty much my entire family came. I never got to do a show in Syracuse. It's one of my regrets because I know that would have been probably the only time that Muhammad Hassan would have gotten a pop, like
Yeah,
like a babyface pop is in Syracuse. I had so many friends and family around.
like
Uh,
Bret Hart 97 almost.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, I loved wrestling, and I loved wrestling all. I got away from it for a little while, and I was really more into sports. And then when I went to college, some of my friends and my roommate was huge into wrestling, and that got me back in. It was during the Rock and Austin era, and I mean, how could you not be drawn in? And that was
No.
like new Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant is watching The Rock and Steve Austin and Triple H and so I got back into wrestling big time, and it wasn't until I was probably about 20 that I was like, man, I want to try this as a career, and that was just kind of how I made my decision. I just loved watching it. I loved the entertainment aspect of it. To me, it grew up with me. You know, wrestling went from being comic-y and caricatures to when I was a kid watching the Junkyard Dog and like I said, Hulk Hogan to now being so like cool, with Steve Austin, The Rock, and all those guys.
Were you a big fan of the heels or were you more a fan of the good guys?
I liked who I liked. It didn't matter if they were a heel or a face. My roommate that I lived with in college was what you would say is a smart fan. Like he knew a lot about wrestling. And he actually taught me a lot more about the backstage stuff, and he had known a lot more than I did at the time. So I like The Rock. Rock is I'm so pretty much all I wear is Project Rock gear. I get
Yeah.
called out on it, but I love the clothing. But I also think The Rock is one of the most iconic wrestlers from my generation. So I didn't care if you were a babyface or a heel. If you were a great character and it was entertaining to watch, then I loved watching you.
What was it about The Rock to you that made you go, man, I could be like that guy?
Well, I can't be like The Rock. I wish I could be like The Rock, but as far as inspiring me to become a wrestler, I actually met him in Buffalo. I don't think he would ever remember this, but he was training at a Gold's Gym in Buffalo, and that's where I trained. I went to school at the University of Buffalo, and he came in and I just tried to not bother him, but I was just watching how he worked out, which he's always been intense, But I mean, you look at The Rock's workouts now, and it's funny because I still do the same thing. Whenever The Rock puts out a video on Instagram, I watch him because his technique is so flawless. Like everything he does that's how I do it now. Like I don't crush weights, I go slow and controlled and, count the negative, explode. But so he was at the Shake Bar Golds 20 something years ago. And I just went up and started talking to him. And he was so cool and personable and just warm and friendly. And he didn't have to be. And I think that was one of the reasons why I became a huge fan. And if you ever hear anybody talk about how The Rock was backstage, I mean, that's why he is who he is because of how he treats people. And then he gets out there and he's just this character. I mean, he is just so entertaining to watch and charismatic that no matter what he's doing, you just can't take your eyes off of him. So first promo I ever did in OVW when I was Mark Magnus and I joined the Revolution where I was wearing leather pants and the stud belts and I remember coming back after that promo and everybody was just kind of looking at me and I had no idea like I thought I did something wrong. Did I steal something from someone? And it wasn't until, a little while later when I'd asked one of the guys in the back, they're like, we didn't know you could cut a promo like that. And that was like my first ever like live in front of people promo. And I remember going out there just thinking, listen, man, you can go out there and be shy and be careful and you're going to fail. Or you can just say, screw it and go out there and try to do your best impression of The Rock. And at least you have a chance at looking good. And I went out there and I tried to do my best impression of The Rock. And it came out well. So I think those interactions and that encounter in Buffalo just really kind of solidified to me who my idol was in professional wrestling. And a lot of what I did, even though I played a completely different character, was really trying to emulate The Rock.
Yeah, I mean, just watching your promos, you're just so natural on the mic, just really taking it all in. What tell me about like when you become a wrestler? I mean, obviously there's a lot of training involved, very intense. It's not just about the promos, it's about the in-ring work and in-ring style. What was your training experience like as far as like learning from some of the people in the business?
I started out in a Saturday class at OVW that Nick Dinsmore taught. Danny Davis was there. Jim Cornette would pop in once in a while, and you paid money every month. I can't remember how much it was, a few $100s. This was in Louisville. Actually, it was in Clarksville, Indiana at the time. And so you go every Saturday, and that would be it. And then, we put together like an amateur show a couple times a year where you get to wrestle matches in front of people. But other than that, it was just a few hours on a Saturday. And then they started inviting a couple of us to come Tuesday nights. This was at Davis Arena, the old Davis Arena, Jeffersonville, Indiana, actually. And we would go Tuesday nights and basically be practice dummies for guys like Brock Lesnar and John Cena and Shelton Benjamin and Matt Morgan, and any new guy that they brought up. And so we did that for a while, but they're pretty honest with us. So, like, they don't just take guys like that into the WWE. It was me, Johnny Jeter, Chris Pavone, all three of us had our shot in the WWE. But they were pretty honest, telling us that it's not likely. But fast forward, not too much longer after that, they allowed us to start working in the daily trainings that the WWE superstars were doing. So then we would go, and we had to work full-time jobs because we had no money. So we weren't getting paid while they all were. It really became the new prototype that OVW still follows to this day, where we would go every day, 6-7 hours a day, working out in the ring with the boys. And then Johnny and I would go work at Chili's that night, because we had to pay the bills. And so we would train. We moved to the new Davis Arena in Louisville, but we would train 6 or 7 hours a day, have to go work out. And until we started getting paid, we were under contract. We would then have to go work. So it was pretty strenuous, but the training itself, I mean, we had the most amazing trainers. I learned a lot about being a man from a lot of my trainers, Danny Davis, Jim Cornette, Rip Rogers, like a lot of things that I still use today in my everyday life, even as a director of human resources now and not a professional wrestler. I learned from them the work ethic, about being overly prepared, about making yourself indispensable, the professionalism. It was an invaluable experience. And we would do a lot of work in the ring, a lot of chain wrestling. We would, be guided through a lot of storytelling because in OVW, that was the most important part. They did not want you to do high spots, just spot, 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 spot. They wanted you to tell a story. And then we would do promo work as well. What I remember most about my time there is that was like my college experience. Like I was, in college, I had goals, and that was to get in great shape and become a WWE wrestler. But it was an OVW that you spend all day with these people, and some of them became some of my best friends that I still talk to this day. So I look back on that as far as my career in wrestling is probably the good old days. Like that's what I miss the most is, going out to Qdoba after training and, hanging out with Jeter and Matt and Shad and Mickey, like, after, at night when we're all done with everything. So I had a great training experience. I learned a lot. And like I said, it was probably nostalgically, probably the best time for me as a wrestler.
It's that camaraderie experience with your friends. I mean, where else can you really get that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. And that's what it was. We were all in it together. We would push each other. We would study together. We'd watch film together. It was camaraderie, and we all have this common goal that we're working towards, and we were supportive. There wasn't a competition. We didn't look at it as, well, if he makes it, I'm not going to. We all wanted to make it. We all wanted each other to make it.
So many legends came out of OVW. I don't know if you've been able to watch the new documentary called Wrestlers.
I did.
On
I
Net-
saw a few episodes. I loved it. I thought it was awesome. I love
yeah.
Al Snow. He's just amazing. He was a trainer there as well. He is just terrific.
Mm-hmm. But like to see the resurgence of OVW, it's really amazing to see how many people came out of that school. Yourself, John Cena, Batista, Brock Lesnar. It's remarkable the work that Rip and Jim have done, and so many others. It's really
Yeah, it really
amazing.
is. They have the one shot that I thought it was awesome is they have their like wall of fame where they have like Shelton Benjamin, like all these guys up there. I mean, there's so many. Sit here and try to name them, it would take forever. But I was up on there, and so I paused the show and I like called my kids down. I'm like, look, that's me, and they're like, yeah. like, like whatever.
Well,
Like,
it's
go
gotta
off.
make, but
I
that's
thought it
gotta
was so
make,
cool.
yeah, yeah, it's gotta make you feel good whenever you see stuff like that.
It really did. It was such a huge part of my life that it was very cool to see that I made a mark, however small, on them as well.
Yes. Now, you get this call to play this character called Muhammad Hassan. We're just a few years away removed from the September 11th attacks, 9/11. Who came up to you with this character? Is there any thoughts like, "Oof, I don't know if I can do this"?
I think it was an idea that Vince had had for a little while, the resurgence of the Arab character, especially after 9/11. I mean, of course, it was just cheap heat at that point. I was approached by Jim Cornette and Arn Anderson. Arn was an agent at the time, and he was down in OVW working with some of the young contracted talent. And they approached me with this idea. We didn't really even know what it was going to be. We just knew that I would be getting a ton of heat playing this Arab American character. Again, the character wasn't developed, but they knew of Sean Devari from his work on the Indies, and so they bring Sean in and they match us up, and we just started working with it. And really, what came most natural, given Sean's experience at the time, it was just this idea that because these people from this country that wasn't even a country that we were supposed to be from, I mean, we're talking Egyptians, right? Saudis, um, did this horrific thing, they treated all of us as if we were, you know, we were part of it, as if we were in cahoots with them. And so that character, that version of the character, is what we started to work on in the vignettes in Connecticut, which eventually was my debut. And that to me was the best version of the character, the version of the character that was petty, that was somewhat delusional, but whose moral compass was actually pointed in the right direction. And it was pointed at the audience, telling them that they're the cause of all this. And that was the best version of the character. We eventually evolved to that after many months of playing around. But to me, that was when Muhammad Hassan was at his peak, was pretty early on, because the character slowly started to evolve after that into something that became more of a character, more of a gimmick, and less of this honest and brutally honest depiction of what was happening in the country at the time.
It's amazing because they say that the best heels are the ones that tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to come out and basically tell the audience what you thought.
Well, I remember seeing a quote from Brian Cox, character actor, X Men. He's played villains, and I think
Mhm.
he's in Succession now. He said something to the effect of, "The bad guys don't know they're bad guys; they always think they're in the right." And I think that that's what made Muhammad Hassan so interesting. Is to everybody else, just because of the things he did, he was a bad guy. But what he said was right, and he believed he was right. And I think that's why that character was so nuanced and so interesting, because I did things that were wrong. It's not like I went out there, like an angel. I mean, I cheated. I, did some pretty
Yeah,
devious things. But at the same time, my character believed he was right and he was justified in doing these things. And he actually, what he was saying was right. It was just his reaction and how he handled it that was wrong. So very nuanced. Like I said, that version of the character was definitely the best version I think that we had before it started to devolve.
what can you tell me about your first meetings with Sean Davari? What was he like to work with?
Oh God, I don't know about my first meet. Sean is amazing. Sean was great. I remember thinking, who is this kid? Because he was like 14. Um, he very talented wrestler, and he was always underutilized as a wrestler because he was also so charismatic and entertaining as a manager.
Mhm.
And because of his size, which even after Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, Sean was still a little bit too small to main event or to be in that category. But as far as wrestling, I learned so much from him about storytelling, about the business. He was way more savvy about the business than I was. Um, he definitely saved my ass a few times, and I wish I would have relied on him a little bit more. But he is a very talented wrestler, and he was uh, probably me as my best friend on the road. I mean, we traveled together, we were together all the time. We still talk. I saw him when I was at WrestleMania weekend. We went out, had a good time. So my first meeting him, I remember in OVW, but it was really my relationship that developed afterwards that is more meaningful to me.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the debut. I mean, weeks gone by with these promos. You come out, you're interrupting Mick Foley. Talk about heel heat right there. the crowd just erupted when that music hit. What was that like walking out on stage that night on Monday Night Raw?
Um, I was shaking, but I was excited. Like getting ready for a match, getting ready for a promo, getting ready to do anything in front of 20,000 people. There's a certain amount of nerves that goes into it, and a certain amount of excitement and anxiety. Um, you're worried that you're going to forget. You're worried that you're going to miss something. You're worried that something's not going to go as planned, which always happens. But I remember coming out that night and just almost shaking with the anticipation. And I had met Mick backstage. I read Mick Foley's book, and I was a huge fan. And I thought that was just so cool that I got to come out and debut in person with, of all people, Mick Foley in the ring. And I thought it was great heat. Again, it was the way that it was presented. I thought it was just great initial heat to start to put the character on that path that was going to make people understand that this character is going to come out and he's going to be pretty raw. And I think that when you see Muhammad Hassan, you know that he's going to say some things that aren't pretty. And I think that was just a great example of how he got hit the ground running with that.
And look at what a career you had in the short time that you were in WWE. I mean, you get to work with so many legends. Mick Foley, Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, just a who's who. Were there like any particular matches that you enjoyed or opponents that you enjoyed working with
Um,
during your
I
time?
love working with everybody. Every guy's different. You're working with guys like, The Undertaker, Kane, like all these guys are so good, and just so much fun to work because they're so good. It really relieves a lot of pressure knowing that you're in the ring with somebody who could probably make a broomstick look like they're a decent wrestler. I would say my favorite opponents were probably Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels. They were more my size, they were athletic, and they were just great, just technicians. Like I can't even explain how good Shawn Michaels is, and Chris Jericho is the same. It's like you think in your head what you want to do next. And it's as if he reads your mind. Like if you knock him down, hit him with a punch, and you think, all right, well, let's go to the ropes and do an elbow. He's already at the ropes, and then watch the elbow, boom, and then you're like, oh, what am I gonna? Okay, let's just beat him down the. Oh, he's already in the corner. Let's go. Like both of those guys just anticipate and work so smoothly. The most fun I had in the ring was probably Shelton Benjamin because Shelton's my boy, and we had a lot of fun just trying to pop each other in the ring. And he's just again just so most athletic person I've ever met. And Chris Jericho, like Chris had a great sense of humor. Him, Davari, and I got along really well, so Davari was in on it, and we would just talk in the ring. And and this was house shows, not TV. TV is different. TV is business. House shows, you got time to kill. But he flip me over, put me in a chin lock, and be scanning the crowd like, damn, you see that blonde in the front row? I'm like, where? Over there. Like we would literally have conversations like that because there isn't a camera tight on your face,
Right.
you got space. And so it was just, that's what I remember about my favorite people to work. It was just having fun and being creative. And Chris and I worked each other so much. It'd be like, finish one or finish two. Let's do finish two. Okay. Like that's how easy it was. And
Yeah.
then we get in there and everybody's like, everybody always and now I work in schools and kids and other adults, and they always ask, like, do you plan everything? It's like, how could you possibly remember a 30-minute match? I'm like, no, you just go out there and play. You talk.
Exactly.
Chris grabs you here, he's going to suplex you. Like Benoit grabs you around the waist, you're getting the belly to back. It's a lot of give and take in the ring, and it's also just a lot of fun to be creative out there.
Exactly. I mean, you almost won the Intercontinental Championship too.
I did win the Intercontinental Championship. I held it for a few seconds, and again, I've been adamant that should be in the record books. But no,
Yeah.
I never had a belt. It would have been nice to have a belt, but I also didn't really need a belt because that character got over so quickly that a belt, it would have been an interesting storyline for the future. But my brief career, it just never had that opportunity.
Let's talk about, you've talked about in other interviews, I know, about your feud with The Undertaker and the events that led up to the Great American Bash. Do you remember the exact, when you got to the arena that day, what the story was? Because this whole thing was taped on a Tuesday, I believe, and it aired on Thursday. And I know they had like the ticker at the bottom that was
Yep.
explaining what happened. But do you remember what was going through your mind when you were like, "Ooh, man, they're gonna have us do this"?
Um, Not really. Like I said, at that point, the version of the character had become more of a fanatic, and I knew we were pushing it. And I knew on SmackDown, especially, we were pushing it because SmackDown was cable, it wasn't network. I feel like we couldn't get away with as much on cable at that time. So I was excited to work with The Undertaker. But I really was against the character being a fanatic, a religious fanatic. It just didn't feel right anymore. But again, you're starting a program with the Undertaker, and that's the direction the character's going. That's the direction you're going, you know. So I just remember thinking this is going pretty far, and I didn't like incorporating prayer in that. I mean, my entrance in the ring was always to do this, but I never
Hmm.
really interpreted that as the praise Allah, which is kind of what I did when the Men in the Mask came out. So in hindsight, obviously it wasn't a smart move, but that character wouldn't have made it much longer anyway. The world began to change around that point, and I didn't think that character was going to have a future in the WWE, especially after what happened on SmackDown.
If you had to write a better ending for the Muhammad Hassan character, what would it be?
I don't know if there is a better ending. Going out by being power bombed by the Undertaker through the stage is it's pretty badass. I don't know, and I'm to the point now in my life at 44 that I'm over the biggest what if in wrestling. Muhammad Hassan is the biggest what if in wrestling, and I don't mean this callously, but I don't really care. Like the character went where it went. Those experiences are mine. They shaped me. They built me. Would I had liked to have a few more years? Probably, but I don't know where I would be if I did. Wrestling's a tough business, and there are very few people like Randy Orton and John Cena and Shelton Benjamin that can be successful at it for so many. I mean, The Undertaker, obviously, Shawn Michaels. I mean, I can name a million, but very few out of the people who try can be successful for that length of time. And I don't know if I would have been. I don't know if I wouldn't. I just know that going back in time, I wouldn't change anything.
Was the plan for you to defeat the Undertaker and go on and become world champion? Because I
It
know
is
that
what
was
I always,
reported.
that's what I always heard. No one ever told me that explicitly, at least that I can remember. I heard it sometime after, but yeah, to beat the Undertaker with the help, obviously, and then wrestle Batista in DC. And the Arab winning in DC against the hometown boy was the story. So if I would have hung in there for like another month, then I could have gotten my belt, but that just didn't work out that way.
Now, do you do you keep tabs on wrestling at all? Did you ever keep tabs on the product for after you left up until now? Was it
More so after I left because I still had my boys on the show that I like to watch. Shad was on the show, Chris was on the show, Masters, Carlito for a while. I don't really keep tabs on it, but I always get all these, my Instagram is full of wrestling videos, I'll watch. And also, if I'm ever flipping through, I'll stop and watch. There are some extremely talented wrestlers in the WWE. And I think the product is starting to evolve. And from what I've heard, once they get to Netflix, it's going to be back to something more like the Ruthless Aggression era, which I'm looking forward to. And I probably will watch then. I still love wrestling. I think some people may think that I don't like wrestling anymore because of what happened. That's not why I don't watch. It's really finding the time. I work 50 hours a week. I have 4 children. They all play sports. It's tough for me to carve out. The only time I watch TV these days is in bed at like 9:30 at night. So I still love it. And I still love watching old videos. That's one thing that I love seeing on Facebook or Instagram is that, the older videos, and I'll sit there and watch those. And if I'm flipping through, if like AEW's on, I'll watch that too. But as far as being dedicated to watching a show, I just don't anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that you're able to find another career path like the world of education. I mean, talk about something drastic, drastic changes. I mean, it's hard working in that field because you got to answer to so many people. You got to work with students and kids and guide them through classes. And what was it about the world of education that just was like, man, I really enjoy this. I want to do this.
I really enjoy history. I was a history major in college. My first time through, I went back to college when I was 30 to get my teaching degree. I think it was. the idea of giving back and doing something that maybe isn't money wise, financially impactful, but people wise is impactful. The intrinsic reward with working with students and helping guide students, again, coming from a large family and I'm the second oldest out of all my cousins, I think that was what drew me to it is that I'd be doing something impactful and something very different than what I had been doing before. Um, it really though started with a love of history and wanting to do something worthwhile. So I was in education. I was a teacher for 4 years. I was an assistant principal for 4 years, a building principal for 3 years, and I've been the director of human resources now for 2 years. So
Wow.
I've had many different roles in education, and I'm consistently moving up. But it is a difficult field. A lot is expected of teachers and educators these days, and there's this sense of entitlement that we can fix everybody's problems and we should be raising everybody's kids. Not everybody, that's not a fair statement, but some people have this perception that the school should be providing a lot more than they're able to financially, resource wise. And so the burden falls on teachers and on principals and on educators in general, to really try to make up for that in any way they can, and it is challenging, but it's again one of those fields that's very rewarding.
What's your favorite part about being around students?
No, God, kids say the craziest things, man. I was like the worst principal because I would just laugh and laugh and laugh. Like, I mean, even if the kid said something naughty, I honestly, I use my sense of humor. I don't take things too seriously unless I have to. And I think my favorite part about being around kids, especially middle school kids, when I was the principal at the middle school, is just the things they say and they come up with and their take on life and their perception because it's just so innocent most of the time and it's so genuine and it's just like I said, I did a lot of laughing as a principal because kids say the craziest shit and I don't know how else to put it.
I mean, you got to think back to when you were a student too. I'm sure you saw some stuff back then as well.
Oh yeah, I always put myself, and I didn't like school, so I always try to put myself in the place of the kids that had a tough time being in school, and I completely understand. I mean, and it's not always just for a lack of trying or a lack of want. A lot of it is just not the right place for them to learn. So you really try to find different pathways and different ways to engage all students so learning is accessible. And I feel like as a principal, I was successful at that because I used my own experience to really try to understand the perspective of some kid who just struggled to be in school in a classroom in rows learning all day.
What are some things that you do to try to help a student learn something or have done in the past?
The best thing you can do is build a relationship with a student, and that was my priority whenever I was a teacher and a principal. Is I knew all of my kids' names as a teacher the first day, and if I messed your name up after the first day, then you got candy. And I probably only gave away 3 pieces of candy in 4 years. I went really far out of my way to learn my students and empathize and engage with them in their personal lives, not related to anything academic. Because once you build that trust in them, once they want to win for you, you can get them to run through walls and it's not for you, it's for them, but they don't realize it at the time. So to me, to motivate a student, the best thing you can do is know that student and really most importantly, genuinely care about that student and their future.
Yeah, I mean, being around students it is the most rewarding, and it can be hard at times because you want to get them to learn whatever it is you're teaching, and you got to find the right method. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and you got to try something else. It's always about repetition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And it's about helping them find the best way that they learn. One thing I
Yes.
used to always tell my kids is you might not need to know algebra, but you need to learn the process of learning. So when you find something that you want to do, you're capable of learning how to do it. It's not always what you learn in school, the content that's important. It's the process of learning itself that school teaches you that becomes important when you're finally doing something that you feel is worthwhile and relevant to who you are.
It's the details. The
Yep.
details are always essential. They're always important. Now, you also mentioned, as we mentioned at the top of the show, you're the director of human resources now. I mean, that's a whole nother um, rung on the ladder, so to speak. What's it like doing that? Being a part of
Uh,
that?
not as involved in kids, but I'm more involved in obviously with the staff, the adults. Sometimes for good, sometimes for not so good. Um, I feel like one of my main roles there is to do everything I can to build a positive culture within my district so that the adults can carry that down to their students. If the adults are supportive, they can support their students. So that's one of my main priorities. I also really focused on building morale and giving Fulton a sense of pride. Fulton City School District, it's about 30 minutes north of Syracuse. So we started this project last year. Our PI guy, Alex from Arbosi's, and it's called the Fulton School Champions. And it's kind of a publishers clearinghouse kind of style presentation where we have the community send in nominations and we select 3 staff members from any area, whether it be food service or an aide or a teacher or a bus driver. And we go out of our way to really set up this big surprise for these people. And we, like I said, you don't know Publishers Clearinghouse either, do you?
I've
They used to like bum rush people with their cameras and be like,
Oh
here's one of
yeah.
the
Yeah,
dogs.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Kind of what we do. We surprise them. It's like you come to work one day, everything's just a normal day, and next thing you know, you have 300 people around cheering for you because you're a Fulton School champion. We'd had 33 of them this year, and that's very worthwhile. And as a human resource director of human resources, you're typically thought of as being very. You think of what's his name from The Office. Um,
Steve Carell's character.
No, not Steve Carell's character. You think of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank because we always joke about it. The HR guy in the office, very
Yeah, yeah,
stuffy,
yeah.
very serious.
Yes.
Toby. Um, it's nice to be able to do something that's complete departure from the legal aspect and the personnel aspect that I normally have to do every day and do something fun and entertaining. Because I mean, we really do. Everybody in the Fulton community watches these videos, and we really get a chance to spotlight our staff members and the work they do for kids. So as a director of human resources, that's unique. I don't think we actually won an honorable mention this year from the National School PR Association, and we were awarded it all the way out in Seattle. So my partner Alex went all the way to Seattle to accept it and talk about the program. So it's a nationally recognized program that really is focused on this local school district and its staff members. And so for me, again, director of human resources, I deal with contracts, I deal with negotiations, I deal with anything legal, I deal with the attorneys if something happens to a staff member with the insurance and benefits. But I also have this great side gig that I get to do. And to me, that kind of brings back the entertainment side of me because it is entertainment. I host it, I go out there, I plan it. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been one of the most worthwhile things that I've done in my career so far. We're doing it next year. We're going to keep it going. So it's got a great
Yeah.
following. We really get average of 10,000 followers or watch views for each video, which is pretty good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like you found that void that was missing, once you left professional wrestling. I mean, it's always good to find something that you love to do. And it's amazing to hear that you're really passionate about this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you at all like talk about your wrestling days around with your students? Do they know that you were once a WWE superstar?
Oh yeah, everybody does. They all do. My district, my superintendent, my board of education are very supportive, and they always have been, which I am very fortunate. I know there's some school districts that would not be so supportive because of who the character was. Even though it was a character, some people can't separate fiction from reality. But I will talk about it if asked, and I've made it a point. It's never something I just go around and say. I'm just not that. It's just not that kind of person. People, and then some people think I don't want to talk about it, but I have no problem talking about it. I'm just not going to walk up and be like, "Hey, I used to be a wrestler for the WWE. You want to talk to me?" It's not. That's just not who I am. But I have kids ask me questions all the time. I love to demonstrate how fake wrestling is. Like I'll always put a wrist lock on them, and I'll say, and I'll act like I'm digging in. I'm like, "Does this hurt?" And they're like, "No," and then I'll just go and turn the wrist. Ow, 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 ow. I'm like, "That's wrestling." That's how it's fake. It's real, but you don't apply 100% pressure because you're not trying to hurt somebody. You're trying to entertain.
And Davari's in the background screaming.
Yeah, right. I,
Man,
I take him everywhere I go.
yep. So cool. Well, let me ask you something. If you ever like get the bug about going back or having a match, has that ever happened? You're like, man, I'd like that. I'd like to go back just for one night.
Yeah, in my dreams, I would love to go back and wrestle a match. In reality, I never would. But in my dreams, I would love to. I mean, I still, lay there at night thinking about wrestling sometimes, about matches, about in the ring, but never again. I'm never going back.
You had mentioned you still talk with Davari. Who are some of the other people that you've had a chance to catch up with?
I saw Shelton Benjamin at WrestleCon when we were in Philly, and that was just great. Like I was like going up the escalator, and I heard him yell my name. I don't even know how he recognized me. I had so much gray hair now, but it was great catching up with him. It's great catching up with Davari. Really, that whole day, I didn't really get a chance to see a lot of my friends. It was kind of a whirlwind. But I don't keep in touch with everybody other than social media. After Shad passed away a few years ago, all of us OBW people got together on like a Facebook meet, and it was really cool. I hope we do that every few years. It's great to catch up with people, but I talk to people through Facebook and messaging, and that's how we stay in touch. But, a lot of us who left the business also have busy lives. So, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, I mean that was a heartbreaking death. Shad Gaspard was just such a joy to be around. Seemed like a nice guy. I mean, that had to have been hard hearing that news.
I'll never forget it, but yeah, it was. I know exactly where I was. I was in that room, and Johnny Jeter texted me, and I didn't believe it. I didn't get it. It took a while to process what was happening. Like, I just didn't get it. Like, what do you mean? Like, Shad? No way. Like, he was one of the toughest dudes I've ever met. But yeah, I mean, it was a tragedy. And I miss him, but I don't really know what to say about it.
Yeah. What is it about giving back to the community with teaching and with being a part of the human resources department that gives you the most joy?
I love working with people, and I love working with people. I am not a lead from the back kind of person. I'm a lead from the front kind of person. I'll never ask somebody to do something that I want to do myself, but I think that that's the most satisfying part of my job now is I have a lot. I mean, I've been in that district for a decade, so I know almost everybody coming in. And I've worked with most people in some capacity. And giving back to the staff in my new career as a director of human resources allows them, like I said before, to give to the students, and that's what we're all here for. We all struggle with things, and we have plenty of battles that we fight throughout the school year, but ultimately we all come to work, and we all come to work because we want to help kids, and we're passionate about leading them in the right direction. So I think that is what motivates me every day, and that's what makes me feel good about my job.
Yeah, I mean, children are the future. Kids are the future, and the more education we, bring and the more things that we can do to help students get successful, that's makes it all worth it in the end.
Yep.
All right. Well, Mark, thank you again for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. It means a lot to me, to my listeners, and my viewers. Where can people find out more about you if they want to keep in touch with you, promote anything?
I don't really have anything to promote yet. I'm hoping soon. Instagram. I'm not a huge social media guy. I actually published whatever the word is, posted something on Instagram after WrestleCon in Philly, where I took some pictures of like the Boogeyman and Rikishi and Shelton, and somebody posted on that a comment like, finally he posts something, and I was dying when I read that because I'm like, yeah, I'm the worst follow ever. Like, you
Really?
see pictures of my kids on Facebook, and that's pretty much it. Like, yeah. But anybody wants to get a hold of me can reach me through there. I mean, I obviously goes right into that folder if I take a look at it, the request folder. But no, I this is fun. It's nice to come on and talk about wrestling, and I do enjoy it now. But as far as the business goes, like I'm just a regular guy here. I'm not promoting anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to, I was great to meet you, of course, at WrestleCon, but it's got to feel good whenever you see the fans, after all these years, they still remember the Hassan character. I mean, it's got to mean something to you.
Oh yeah, I'm shocked. I always am, but it really does. I mean, I did not have a long career at all, and I think 20 years later, people still remember it. I think it's that whole mystique of the too controversial for television, but I'll take it. I mean, it's really cool to have people still reach out, and it's 99% positive, and it's like I said, it's a huge pick me up sometimes to have people tell me their stories and how I affected or influenced them. It's great.
Well, again, I just want to say thank you, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.